Welcome back, everybody, to your daily or almost daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And we're back with Deadhouse Gates, Book 3, all the stuff I forgot to mention last time. By which I mean all the stuff I forgot to mention last time and have remembered by now, which is obviously not the same as all the stuff I forgot, because I tend to forget more than I remember, which is old age. Or some other reason that I cannot think of right now. Or maybe me not making notes or being lazy and all of that. But I can just blame it on the books being so dense and complex and it's easy to forget stuff. I think that sounds better, all right? So we'll keep it with that. The state of the scarf. I'm sort of at the point where I'm figuring that maybe I should just leave it at that, because I'll just put it around and I can put it once more around my neck. And it comes down to here again. And since this is a rather big one, like thick one, maybe that's enough. I figure like another round might be too much, because then I'd look like a mummy, I guess. So maybe we'll keep it at that. Maybe just a little more, like, I don't know, couple, like, I don't know, 10 centimeters or so. We'll see. I'll just leave it on for now. I feel that's a good idea. Yeah, let's look at all of that. We're still with a super boring beer because I didn't have time to get more beers. Also, I think I'm at 99 subscribers, which is fucking incredible. So thank you to you, 99. And maybe we've reached the 100, which is a completely arbitrary mark. I know it gives you some benefits, but come on, that's not the point. But I can call myself a YouTube centurion after that, so I'll do that gleefully once I've reached that magical 100. So let's get started. Cheers. Well, this feels appropriately wintry. So last time round we focused mostly on the Chain of Dogs, the Daika and soldiers and so forth narrative, and kind of ignored other stuff. And there's a lot of other stuff going on there. There's a lot of important other stuff that I should have probably, but didn't mention. So we're going to do that now. Going to look into the other two big narratives now today. That's the Felicin, Heboric, flight from Otaterral Island trip, and the Kalam Manala flight through the Imperial Warren kind of narrative. And there's a lot going on there because I already left out the Crocus Fiddler Mapo Icarium part, which we'll also come to, because holy shit, this is so much. Mr. Erickson, could you please write shorter, simpler books? It would make it so much easier. No. Okay, so a couple of things that I feel are important. The events on the Cylinder, that boat in that Warren that might have been Emerlan or something else. Those are really important. Pro tip for those who read the series for the first time: take something and use it as a bookmark for that scene, and put the book aside. Once you read later installments of the series, you might want to come back to that scene and look at the scene again to realize what was going on there. Just a tip. All right, we also learn more interesting cosmology stuff there. We talk about souls. Souls are things, apparently. Souls are things. We learned that when we're talking about the fact that the soul of one of the Talan Aimas is used to, like, close or bridge the wound in the Warren. So the whole Warren's system is getting more and more weird and complex. I've said it before, I'm not a lore person. I don't know, I guess I'm too lazy to be a lore person. But what I find interesting there is, yeah, the metaphysical implications of that. It's like you have different Warrens, you have Warrens, you have obviously borders between warrens, like walls. They're described as walls or something like that. Sounds rather organic if you ask me. Like, this idea of, I don't know, having these parallel warrens. They're all like mixed up like a big pile of macaroni, I guess. And either you're in one macaroni or a different macaroni, and then you gotta get out of one and get into the next, and then you need to close those. But apparently, the walls of those warrens are made of some kind of energy, power, whatever, that can be bridged by souls. And that only works if you have a soul that is actually somehow, that is something that actually exists. So yeah, souls have to exist. Of course, we knew that before, because souls existed before, when we had the soul shifting from Tattoosail and Hairlock and stuff like that in Gates of Gardens of the Moon. But now we see that those souls are more than just awareness. There's obviously power and energy in there that can be used. Apparently, the awareness remains, though, which is kind of creepy, because they say that the pain will be forever in there. So yeah, there's awareness coupled to energy, and I'm not sure what that means. It feels a lot like your run-of-the-mill hobby spiritualism that you have like in the world right now. That sounded real arrogant. I'm almost sorry about that. Almost. But this, there's power and energy, and it's like vague things. Maybe it's more complex, and I'm just too stupid to realize it, or too cynical. I don't know. We will have to see. Maybe I'll get more out of it in later installments, in later books. But the fact that the energy of warrens is compatible with the energy of souls should tell us something. And I guess we'll have to see what that means, because probably we'll learn more about that later on. I just figured, think about those kind of things, because, like, I don't know, I like to think about those implications that you have in there, those metaphysical, physical, and philosophical implications from there on. Another thing is we get to see more like slow reveals of the world, of the Malazan world. We feel that apparently there's things going on that we don't know about, and that also our characters know nothing about. We have the point where, I think it's Culp, I guess it's Culp, they're like thinking about, they're when they have like this idea that the Malazan Empire is reputed to have maps of the entire world, and then they figure out that, oh shit, there's probably a couple of continents missing there. Who at that point thinks about the idea of old world, late medieval, early Renaissance ideas of the world, and the idea of traveling from the Mediterranean further to the west until you reach India or Asia. In that case, well, they were looking for India, or what they called India at the time, to get spices and enslave people and burn their entire islands once they've taken their spices and stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm trying to look at is like the idea of, the world, and then you suddenly realize the world is much larger because you run into a continent that's maybe smack in the middle of your oh so simple sea route. That kind of thing is sort of going on here, apparently, but luckily people realize that there might be something in the middle before they've already inveigled, I don't know, thousands of gold coins from the king and queen of a different country. Just saying. Sorry. All right. What else do we see in that part? We travel through warrens. We have this whole concept when they travel on the ship through a warren, following a dragon that is also a soul taken. And something else we learn later on, that is apparently a Talan Imas soul taken, an undead dragon, which is like just the sheer visual awesomeness of that is just really cool. We get some really weird magic thing when we have the idea of Culp as a practitioner of the Shadow Warren, which is all about illusion, kind of trying to cheat the universe. which made me remember Terry Pratchett because like almost everything makes me remember Terry Pratchett. But just saying, there's this idea in Pratchett. He always says like there's the things that you do where you try to cheat the universe or do something that you can do until the universe catches up and realizes that you've been trying to cheat it. I think that's also like something that kind of, you know, that kind of concept and idea that you also see in Douglas Adams when he talks about the way to fly is like to fall and miss the ground. It's like this idea of taking the universe as an entity that you can then fool or trick or whatever, which I don't know. It's not important. I just, it just popped into my mind. I figured this is me preaching anyway, so I can just preach about that. How about that? Wonderful. All right. What else do we learn there? We see all that undead magic, that ghost ship stuff. We see much more of the really rough camaraderie between Gesla and Stormy, which is one of the best friendships, best couple of people, at least some of my favorite people within the Malazan books in general, especially Stormy. I kind of feel, I don't know, a certain connection to him is what I'm trying to say. And that's not just because I'm a hairy bastard who doesn't actually think clearly and drinks a lot. That's not all. That would be Benaskar, which you don't know yet. All right. What I was trying to say is that the way this friendship is shown from the outside is really cool because so far we have not yet had either Gesla or Stormy as a viewpoint character. We just see them through Felician's eyes, mostly Felician's eyes, and a bit of Heboric or Culp. No, not really Culp, but we see them from the outside, which I find very interesting. It's once again this like show don't tell kind of establishment of character and relationship, which I find very, very well done here. We also see more of this like rough soldier's humor in a way to deal with trauma, which we'll get more of later on. And yeah, we see that traveling through Warrens in the wake of power, we just like super cool to see like how they follow the dragon and then travel into this other Warren that is burning and they don't know what it is. And then we have Felicin and Bodin and Culp and Heboric fleeing that ship and jumping off and ending up in, for want of a better word, the real world, like the physical human plane of existence in Seven Cities in Raraku or close to Raraku, which gives us more insight on this whole idea of the warrens like overlapping each other, which kind of is really interesting because to have the idea that you're standing in a desert, but there's also parallel like this warren, like this world full of fire that's on the same in the same spot. It's kind of interesting to get into and gives you lots of stuff to think about. But anyway, we have that. We have finally get some more out of Bodin, where we realize that he is more of a more than just a thug. I mean, that was fairly obvious from the beginning, but now we actually get confirmation of that. We also get something about that whole duel between, not duel, but the situation between Felicin and Tavor, whatever you want to call her, and her actually trying to protect Felicin and get her out of there and do all of that for a certain political situation, like political issue with her house, noble house, on the one side after the desertion or whatever of the of Dujak's army and their brother, who was obviously Gano Asparan, as we already know. So this makes Tavare look less cruel, I would say. still very cold and planning and all of that. That's something that was already established in that first scene where we meet her for the first time when she talks to Ganoas in Gardens of the Moon. I guess you remember that. And she's already pretty pissed at Ganoas running off and doing his idealist thing, and Felicin being Felicin at the same time, where she says she's too soft for this world, or I don't remember the exact words, something along the lines of being too soft for the world. And it's basically, and their parents having like retreated onto their country estate and leaving the world behind. So all of that falls on the shoulders of Tavore to make sure that everyone who is following their maybe childish idealist views and dreams actually has a place to live and a house they belong to and some kind of safety. And we see how that falls on her, and she's trying to how she's trying to deal with that. I mean, she makes that kind of like, she already sort of blames Ganoas at that point for her having to do all of these things. And now we see what the cost actually can be, like some of the cost can be. It's like her having to figure out how to sacrifice her sister, or apparently sacrifice her sister, while still having a back plan that is outside the current administration, the current structure of the empire, by reaching back to that group of talons and stuff like that. That's some already deep level planning, also some very, very rational, unemotional planning in a way. All still while trying to, keep up the responsibilities and keep up your humanity in a way. Keep up your responsibilities to everyone involved. Now we'll see how, obviously it didn't work out that well. And especially at this point, this is a vital point there, because what we see there is that some things are beyond healing. Some things are beyond repair. They are so broken that you cannot fix them again. That's something that's obviously, we obviously say a lot and stuff like that. It's a very trite comment to say that something's beyond fixing. But in this scene, I think it's made really well when you see it from Felicin's view, sort of. And she realizes that her sister was trying to help her and save her, and she consciously says, not enough, and sends Boda away. That's a very, very important scene for Felicin, I would say. It once again shows that thing that I spoke of in other places, the idea of agency, and having agency being vital for one's self-awareness, one's self-confidence, obviously, as well, one's self-esteem. Having agency is very important there, because the really the terrible thing there, as I see it, is that yes, Tavor tried to save Felicin, but basically Felicin is, or feels, at least that's how I read it, feels like a pawn, a piece of piece of goods or whatever that is just bartered out and then retrieved and pushed around, and unfortunately got damaged in the way, on the way, because of things. And that is taking away Felicin's self and Felicin's humanity, obviously, her individuality, her humanity. Dehumanizes her. And that happens, no matter what happens on the way to the slave ships, on the slave ship, in Skull Cup and everything, even if all of that would have been perfectly fine, worked out as Tavor has planned it, it still dehumanizes and objectifies, in a way, Felicin. And she realized that at this point, and her sending away Baudin is an act of freeing herself from that, and accepting agency, and saying that she is her own mistress, master, whatever you want. She is herself, and she decides. It's a decision that she makes, because all the decisions before that, all the decisions she made are decisions that basically count for nothing because there's this her sister planned all of that together with a hired bodyguard. Now she decides, or believe that she decides, because obviously we see that that's not the end, and Bodan still follows her and tries to help her because he takes that mission very seriously. That's something we also need to talk about. I guess Bodan is worth a lot of thoughts that kind of get swept under the rug often because, like, yeah, he's an awesome fighter. He's also kind of a dickhead and an asshole. He's much more because he's once again one of those people who have pushed down their humanity, their individuality, very, very deep down, as cost for having like their role. Like this idea of taking a vow or taking vows, certain vows that basically reduce one's humanity and make that vow, that oath, the overarching one thing that really, really defines a person and not their multifaceted like humanity. That's something that makes people inhuman in a way. Bodan obviously is a character that comes across as super inhuman in his superhuman strength and all of that stuff. And yeah, but that comes at a cost, at a terrible cost of humanity. And that's something we see in Bodan. And in this situation, they're both basically locked in those different patterns. Like Bodan can't stop protecting Felicin because he swore that, and that's his raison d'etre at this point. It's the only thing that really counts, is him fulfilling that mission. And on the other hand, you have Felicin, who wants to actually be herself and make decisions. Well, her decision is basically to wreak revenge on Tavora at this point, because she blames Tavora for everything, not unreasonably. Now, the point is, Tavora obviously probably had very little choice in what to do. There's like an early on situation where she said, like, didn't you realize, sister, that Hood stood on both sides of this decision because her mother obviously also died. But, the point is, Felicin has a reason to blame Tavora. And the fact that Tavora planned to take her out again and so forth makes the perceived crime or crime of Tavora towards Felicin less heinous. But it's nevertheless something of a crime to take away someone's agency and basically move them around without ever asking, with them ever giving any consent. Now, it's another thing for, say, in the situation with what's her name, Adjunct Lorne. Adjunct Lorne, more or less willingly, as far as we know, decided to become the adjunct to the Empress. Tavora, more or less willingly. There's obviously always outside forces that like guide someone to take a decision, but in the end, it was Tavora's decision to become the Empress, the adjunct to the Empress, or Lorne's. Whereas Felicin never had any decision. She was just moved around as a chip in a game, and that's it. And her sending away Bodan is, in this situation, the only thing that she can do and still keep some kind of self-respect, self-awareness, or whatever going. I mean, I find it hard to speak of self-respect with a person like Felicin at that situation because she's been broken so much. But she has to send Bodan away to keep that sense of self going. And on the other hand, Bodan can't just abort the mission because he swore that oath to Tavora, not to Felicin. Of course, he leaves, seemingly, because he's obviously not someone to go into conflict. That's something that's very interesting with Bodan, is like physical conflict is something he goes into, of course, as a matter of of course, but he avoids these kind of decisions. So he just leaves and just trails them to make sure they're safe from the back, which is this like super stupid toxic masculinity kind of thing that you do, that a lot of men do, is like the grim protector. You can just imagine Bodan being the guy who sits like all ranger style in the corner of the tavern and looks at everyone and is grim and then comes out to actually be super protective in the end. He is kind of that, but Ericsson's, I don't want to say genius, but skill is talent is to actually show us how stupid that is and how problematic that kind of behavior is. So yeah, that's something I felt like talking about is important. Then we have all the scene in the city of the divers, and we get much more information that we can't deal with right now, that we can't even understand, about the First Empire, the Talan Imas fighting Soul Taken, the problem of becoming a Soul Taken or divers. I just really love the name Divers and Soul Taken. I know later on people in the audiobook call it Solid Taken or whatever. That doesn't make any sense. I love the idea of Soul Taken as opposed to Divers, whether you change into one other form or all kinds of lower forms, like from a linguistic point of view. It kind of makes sense for me. Anyway, that's just one of those info dumps where you just, like, not info dumps, but like a situation where you see the world is so much older and bigger and crazier, and you don't even know what's going on. But obviously, with all those Soul Taken and divers on the path of hands, you realize that not knowing history is fucking dangerous, because that shit is going on all around you, whether you know about it or not. And that kind of sense of vastness and sense of having no control that you feel as a reader in that situation, because you hear all this stuff is just dropped on you and you don't know what is going on. But it very much mirrors like the feeling of the people in that situation, who also have like no clue whatsoever what's going on, and just realize that they're constantly in way above their heads, which, you know, is a generally good metaphor for life, because usually we're all way in above our heads. That is just like how life is. It's one of those things that you could call the human condition. It's like not knowing how things will turn out. We have that. We then have the rather sad demise of Culp, and the sort of heroic death of Baudin showing up again, because obviously he did not actually abort the mission, and at least damaging Grillin, the evil divers that we've heard before about. Also the bear. We meet those guys again and again. It's one of those rather kind of macabre, humorous scenes. Is that whole thing with Grillin on his palanquin with his undead servants and all of that. It's like you sit there, you read it, and you're like, gods, how can everyone be so fucking stupid? And then they make stupid jokes about undead being eaten by rats and stuff like that. I don't know, just like the sheer fact of them, all of them, the servants being obviously victims of the rat divers, and they're always like, yeah, my death was horrible, and no one even wants to believe them. And if they even just listen to those, you know, it's kind of sad to see that. Well, it's one of those comments on us as humans. It's like, yeah, we see stuff, like we have stuff in plain sight and we just ignore it, and then we get the consequences. And once again, yeah, Culp is dead. It's a super meaningless death. He just, like, I don't know. And meaningless deaths are something that has become sort of a thing that people see in, I don't know, Game of Thrones and all of that. It's like, those are not meaningless deaths. They are dramatic and unexpected for someone who reads that kind of thing for the first time and realizes that not all major characters have plot immunity. But they're not meaningless in a way. They're just, they make sense in a sense for the plot. And then you have this, like, yeah, sometimes life's a bitch and it just kills you, and you don't, like, there's no reason. There's no reason. You don't deserve it. There's nothing in your actions, like nothing real in your actions, except of like maybe thinking a bit slow, is to blame for you dying there. You just ran up against something you had no control over and it kills you. That's, yeah, it's sad and unfortunately rather realistic. And then we have Baudin coming back and dying, and we see that Felicien at least shows some humanity to the dying Baudin when he when she sees that he still tried to help them and he actually saved their lives. So we have some closure there. It doesn't help him any because he's dead now, and it doesn't help her because she now has to sort of live with him dying for her, and that's not something you want on your conscience in general, I assume. Oh, what else? I think that's more or less all I want to talk about on this part of this story. I feel we also need to talk a bit about what's going on with Kalam and Manala and Kenab there. What's important there? Now, there's an amazing new video that Iskar Jarek made about Apt, the Aptorian Demon, and I just recommend y'all watch that because he talks very much and smartly about that character. I'll just like try to not talk too much about her. I want to look more at the depiction of violence, of war crimes in there, and yeah, mostly about that. So we see Kalam being that person torn between loyalties. He still has his loyalty to the Malazan Empire. He has kind of this loyalty to Seven Cities. He has the loyalty to Whiskey Jack and Dujak that forces him to go to the Heartland and try to kill the Empress, which, yeah, anyway, so he comes across those bandits that pretend to be part, like, yeah, kind of claim to be part of the rebellion, but are basically just in there for their own. He then makes contact with the Malazan refugees, switches to their side because it's the morally less wrong side to be on. There might be some kind of guilt thing going on there because, yeah, I mean, technically he sort of started, probably not really started because from what I'm not good with the timeline, but it feels like the whole thing was already ongoing or started, the rebellion started before he delivered the book, actually. Anyway, so we see him taking on that role, that protector role there. There's some interesting dynamics there with Manala that might be worth a deeper look at, which I'm not qualified to do right now, and I don't feel qualified to talk about that. Maybe I'll at some later point. That the whole idea of attraction and rejection kind of thing that's going on there is is very interesting. And yeah, we then have that rather, not really so abstract, but description of that whole cruelty massacre Corbolo Dom perpetrated, where he crucified all those children. That's like super brutal. And once again, what we see there is that, I think Ruth and Bud said that in a video on the Hobbling. There's no gratuity there. Like, the description is rather clinical and journalistic, and that's definitely true here as well. But still, the sheer enormity of what happened there, like crucifying hundreds of children, that's really brutal. It's also, unfortunately, not something that has not happened before in human history. So you cannot just say, oh, that's just fantasy. But it's interesting that the one being taking pity on those children, like Kalam does, but being a human and somewhat of a realist, within his frame of mind and frame of reference, the only thing he can do, he believes, is take revenge. Whereas the one person actually taking pity on the humans and doing something about it is the demon. That's on that whole discussion of what makes a human, that is a very powerful point right there. Her argument with Shadow Throne then, gives us more parallel, like more insights on the person of Shadow Throne, which is also super interesting when you compare Shadow Throne and you compare him with that high priest of his Iskarel Past in all its craziness. Yeah, makes you wonder how much there's like a feedback loop going on between gods and their devotees in a way. But that's something for another day, I suspect. Yeah, we get some Warren travel. We get some very, very interesting hints on the whole world concept, the world building, deep time, when Kalam goes into the Warren and looks at that, sees those ruins and sees that sigil of Kalor the High King. And we remember that thing with Kalor the High King, that short bit in Gardens of the Moon. Or now we do, because Erikson actually mentions it like very cleverly so we don't forget. Yeah, that that one, you know, connects once again these small bits that are left and scattered all over the books that like hint at this larger picture, which is just done very well. We have that quick thing where Pearl and Lostara Yill, another very interesting couple, follow them, the refugees, but then make this quick side trip where they go and fight the Semp Godling and like basically help out that point that we read earlier. I think earlier, yes, we read it earlier from Daika's side out, from Daika's side. So that's like an interesting, like, so we see the other side of that as well. And we see something of Pearl as being Pearl in a way. That's pretty good and pretty impressive and well done. I like that, the way that shows up very much, especially because then also Apt shows up and you have like three parties, none of which knows about the others and all fighting in the same fight. And that's just like, life's messy and people don't communicate enough, which is basically, I guess that's like that best summary of the Malazan Empires, the Malazan Book of the Fallen series that Iskar Jarek asked for like a month ago. It's like basically you can sum it up in life's messy, people don't communicate with enough, so life becomes even more messy. That's about it basically. There's more to it, obviously. So we have that. We then have that final parting of the others when they reach Aaron, of Kalam leaving onwards and so forth. May I just say that that tavern scene in Aaron, that's once again one of those things where I feel that the pen and paper role-playing background shows through, because the description of that tavern they're in there, that bar, that's pure role-playing there, right there for me. It's like, yeah, it's so slightly over the top, the idea of having that kind of bar with that warped floor with all the dead like bodies and stuff rolling down into the center of it. That's, yeah, feels very role-playing-y for to me. Anyway, so that was that. What else was I want to say? Yeah, we finally get something that was hinted at very, very heavily throughout the entire book of Deadhouse Gates. We get a first, like, deeper look into the whole idea of obviously Servant being being Absalah's father, and then the idea of Absalah taking over Shaikh's role when Shaikh is dead. Now, does that happen? Of course not. It's obviously Felicin doing that, because no matter how well you plan, sometimes things just happen and there's coincidences there and pure chance, and that can just fuck up everything, basically. Or was that the case? Or was there maybe some plan behind it? Who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying that the way things are planned there and everyone basically realizing it, and Crocus being the slowest because obviously he's still in love and he's only, I don't know, 16 or at this point 18 maybe? Who knows? We get more hints at the whole thing, the whole Mappo Ikarium situation, where we basically now know that Ikarium has this super dangerous dark past or whatever, and he's trying to figure out what his past is. And we have, on the other hand, Mappo, who is sworn to keep him from finding out what his past is, while at the same time having become Ikarium's friend. And you have this like loyalty issue there very deeply. Mappo is one of the finest characters, like one of my favorite characters within the series, because of how he tries to balance these two loyalties and friendship, which is the loyalty that is very, very, very like the human quality there. I mean, he feels for Ikariam all the time. He just knows that letting Ikariam find out is even worse than letting Ikariam suffer. And to watch someone suffer that you cannot prevent from suffering is something that is very, very, very hard in general. And what Mappo does, which is kind of different from what Kalam did at the same situation when he watched those crucified children, he just swore revenge and moved on. Mappo stays. Mappo stays and watches and witnesses Ikariam's suffering, because Ikariam is suffering. We don't, it's not, it doesn't show like super brutally, but Ikariam is suffering continuously, basically. And Mappo is there and is witnessing that suffering, and he knows he's part of that suffering. He takes part in that. He's an active part, but he stays and witnesses because of his friendship and of his humanity, and that's just deeply moving for me. So what else? I feel that sort of is more than enough for one video. I'll continue tomorrow with book 4, a first part of book 4. I think maybe something else. We'll see. Until then, cheers.